Last week, Malaysia was shocked to learn that Axiata and Telenor is going to merge, creating perhaps one of the largest companies in the country. And of course, this follows their subsidiary brands. Axiata has Celcom and Telenor has Digi. They will become the largest telco company domestically. Here to understand a little bit better about the impact and the significance of all this is Jalil Rasheed, the CEO of Invesco. Thanks, Jalil, again for spending the time to come here in KL and spend time with us. I think the first question on top of everybody's mind is, of course, the antitrust issues, whether or not it's going to be fair for this company to operate under a very constricted sector. Post-merger, we'll see more than 50% market share between Digi and Celcom. That's just the tip of the iceberg. But do you think that the regulators will let this pass?
I think the context of the industry now is that the cost of building out telco infrastructure has gotten incredibly expensive. Right? We're in 4G, we're talking about 5Gs. So the only way for telcos to survive and give service to consumers is to get larger. So you spread the cost base around, and which was why the whole merger was even mooted in the first place. Now, in terms of, they will not be the only telco in Malaysia. There'll still be the other operator. I think the issue that perhaps the authorities would want to understand better would be, is there, how would the human resourcing look like? If those aspects can be managed, I don't think there is a risk that there would be an absolute concentrated monopoly. Because the other side of the coin is that you say a country like Malaysia, 30 million population, you have say 5 telcos. You are not going to reap the benefits of a world-class infrastructure.
And of course, I think if we use the same logic, telcos need to merge because they need to scale.
Yeah.
Does this also signal that perhaps other telcos would also amalgamate and consolidate their position and see further mergers taking place in this sector?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a very interesting merger, which will probably be very, people will be watching it. The merger is supposed to close somewhere middle of next year, so people will see how this has panned out, and they might be thinking perhaps we should be looking at something too, right?
One thing that I like is, of course, what they call non-vertical mergers, where companies from different sectors come together. We see this a lot of times in the US, but in Malaysia, at least in this part of the world, it's actually rather rare. I wouldn't say quite rare, but rather rare. And so, do you think that even non-telcos can now speak to telco companies and see some diversity in terms of their businesses and try to find some common ground and merge between these two sectors?
Yeah, but perhaps you could. I mean, if you look at the telco industry in many countries, you have some maybe in emerging markets where they're just purely telcos, right? They own the tower, they give the telecommunication services. In some of the more developed countries, because they have reached the saturation stage, they have moved on to provide other services. So they provide content. They can also provide, TV services. And this was traditionally not part of their own DNA. This came from other companies, as a result of being acquired and all that. So yes, that will happen. But but I think it will probably take some time for Malaysia to reach that, because this merger is going to be quite epic in terms of its size, and they need to get the integration right. And once they've done that and they've hit the saturation stage, is when they will probably need to think about where the next growth element is going to come from, right? People are not going to end up having 5 cell phone accounts. So that's where the question comes, where's the revenue?
The briefing that was done by Maxis about 2 weeks ago by their newly appointed CEO, Gokun, he argued that Maxis itself, they're going for convergence, where we're seeing lesser of a differentiation factor between fixed line, mobile phones, internet, that kind of stuff. A lot of things are going to be converged. And he argues at that point in time that Maxis will seek growth, not just in the country, but perhaps in other markets as well, on finding customer growth in similar but not the same kind of services. Do you think that these kind of strategy that is going to kind of be rolled out, because I can't imagine Maxis is the only one doing this, other people is going to do this as well, from U-Mobile to TM and stuff like that. Do you think that the convergence notion is one of the areas where telco companies might grow their user base?
Yeah, so the line that used to separate telcos, I'm a fixed business, I'm a mobile business, I'm a broadband business, that's been torn down, right? Because your infrastructure is now getting much more agile. You can
I guess
almost
ubiquitous as well.
exactly,
Yeah.
and you can use the same infra. You don't need to kind of build 3 infra for 3 different businesses, right? So because of that, there is more businesses that you can now put through the same infrastructure. So it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. You know, you always, typically telcos always focus on their core business to hit subscriber numbers, right? And once that penetration rate has hit 100%, you need to start thinking about what's next for the business.
The Axiata ownership is also key to
Yes.
to be discussed. Khazanah also perhaps gave a nod to the merger.
Yeah.
I can't imagine Axiata moving ahead without getting a nod, or at least you know, non obstruction from Khazanah before they went into these merger talks. But I think one of the key roles that Khazanah plays, of course, for nation building, it's not just for chasing dividends, chasing profits, chasing user base. It's also trying to see if job employability is there, skillful workers are being created, those kind of stuff. But it goes without saying, sometimes merger would create redundancies, and we're going to see a lot of people being laid off, or to some notion being moved away from merge into something else, some spin-off company. Do you think that that is something that Khazanah is ready to swallow and perhaps agree upon?
Well, it's not just, it's not, you know, the burden shouldn't fall on them as you know, the owner of the merged entity. I think this is something that the merged entity needs to manage themselves, right? And coming back to your earlier point about would this run into regulatory issues, let's not forget they will operate in 9 countries, right? If you just look at Malaysia, I think that will be where the authorities will be most keen to address, right? Are there going to be these sort of redundancies, and if there is there a reskilling element to it, you know? And I think, you know, reskilling is something that can be done. The businesses are, although they're in telco, both although DG and Celcom are both in the same business, one is very predominantly prepaid business versus the other being postpaid. You know, the margins are very different, the way they do their distribution is different, their clientele segment is different. So there is a lot of synergies there, right? Which the MergeCo is the one that should be responsible for. You know, Khazanah's role is a bit beyond that. You know, more of a strategic asset allocator. And there's some interesting things that have come up from this merger is the setup of an innovation hub. And I think that's what perhaps a country like Malaysia needs as it tries to move up a bit more on the innovation and skill and knowledge curve.
All right, and so you touched on 2 very important points. Number one, the Innovation Center, and of course the alluding notion that it's going to be ASEAN-based and regional-based. If we follow the press release given by Axiata, it says that they want to become a global digital champion. This is called Axiata 4.0, they call it. Largely because all the entities are going to be headquartered in Malaysia, and they're going to create 4 big ideas. Number one, an international MergeCo, the Malaysia company, which is the combination of Celcom and DG, a global tower company, which is perhaps the enlarged E.co or E.co on ultra steroids, I suppose, and the Innovation Center that you have briefly touched upon. This idea is, a lot of people can see some concrete creation in terms of MergeCo and the global tower, but the Innovation Center, for the longest of time, Malaysia has been trying to create innovation centers left, right, and center, anywhere from magic to other stuff. Do you think that the creation of Axiata for an innovation center will actually reap some benefits instead of just a lip service kind of thing?
Yeah, so currently Axiata does quite a lot of interesting things on the digital side. You know, it's not been very well understood by the market. Also, given that, you know, as a proportion to revenue, it's not really contributing a lot right now. You know, it's never been talked about, but you know, they do some very interesting stuff there. Everything from payment, fintech to, you know, advertising and doing all that. And DG as well, or Telenor as well, does quite a lot of interesting things within their group. So it's a very interesting marriage between the two, that they can find something to do. And interestingly, it's going to be headquartered here, which is
Which is going to be crazy, right?
Which is what the government wants.
The financials speak for themselves. The pro forma financials that has been presented to the media is that right now, revenue-wise, between the companies of telcos in the region, is that Axiata is still the top 10, but somewhere below the top 10. But post-merger, it will become the first, ahead of Telkomsel, Airtel, Singtel, Reliance Jio, AIS, Globe, you name it. That's already a massive mega mammoth telco company in the region, headquartered in Malaysia. But the thing about mergers is that you're not mixing two, financials, stamping it together, here you go, it works that way. It doesn't work that way. It's a merger of people, it's a merger of ideas, it's a merger of cultures, more importantly. And do you think that there would need to be some allocation of, I don't know, adjustment period, and this would take years even, for this merger to actually garner some synergy?
Absolutely. I think when this news came out, a lot of people were asking about, does this make sense? Absolutely. On paper, where the industry is going, and given that it's very complementary where they are merging in terms of geographies, there's very little overlap. Malaysia and Bangladesh should be the only two countries where both of them have operations. Makes perfect sense. Now, operationally is when the challenge will come in, right? You are merging 9 operations in 11 or 12 operations in 9 countries. You're merging different cultures, different people. That typically takes a bedding down process, right? And that is all down to how good your integration is. So that is where the true challenge for this merge-co is. How can they merge it? Can they really reap the synergies of the cost savings that they have
extolled about,
they're spoken about. It's when you do the numbers on paper, it all makes sense, right? You see, this merges, we can cut that out and we save X. Whether you can actually extract that out and do it, that's the key question.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Jalil. That was my conversation with Jalil Rasheed, the CEO of Invesco. Again, thanks for spending your time with us. If you missed this show or you want to catch more of these kind of shows, just head on to astroawani.com/notepad. We also have other shows on offer, including Let's Talk and shows that were being brought to you by Melissa Idris as well. That's it from me for this week. Until next time.